Okay, let's start with the session, guys. So first, let me open the document. Hmm. So part of the session, yesterday's session, what I told is, okay, how to write the Spring configuration file and why we are writing the Spring configuration file. How does, sorry, how does the dependency injection works and how does the dependency lookup works? And suppose if you want to write a Spring configuration file, basically, how can you able to write the Spring configuration file? So this is how you can able to write the Spring configuration file. I told it is an XML file. So if you want to write the Spring configuration file, you can write any name. .xml is extension, and the root tag is called beans tag, and there is a parent tag called bean tag, which has two important attributes called what? ID and class attributes. ID and class are the two different and important attributes of the bean tag. So like this, you can repeat multiple times. Later on, we are going to see what are the child tags that we are going to write inside the bean tag later. Okay. Then we discuss about types of Spring containers, because Spring container is nothing but it is one class. Spring container is a class, and that class will have the or will take care of creating the objects of our application and also managing those objects and also injecting the dependency objects. So who will take care of all these things in our Spring? Taken care by the Spring container. Who is Spring container? It is also one class, but that class is predefined class, not created by you and me. That class is not a user defined class. It is a predefined class. It is a class created by the or given by the Spring framework, not created by the developer. Okay. Okay. So in Spring, who is that container? It is a class, sorry, which implements what and what? Which implements what? Bean factory interface or application context interface. The classes in Spring which implements Bean factory interface or which implements application context interface, they are called as Spring containers. I told in the last class, there are two types of Spring containers. One is called Bean factory container and second one is called application context container. Currently, we don't have any Bean factory container. We all have applications with what type of container only we are going to use? Application context. Because Bean factory container does not support annotations. But nowadays, all applications are going to use, all Spring applications are definitely going to use the annotations. That's why what type of container is given? Application context container is provided. Application context container is an advanced container than which type of or extension of which container? Bean factory container. Application context is an extension of Bean factory. Application context is an extension of Bean factory. I told in the last class, Bean factory is an interface. Bean factory is an interface. XML Bean factory is the implementation class. For an interface, we need to have implementation class, right? So who is the implementation class of Bean factory? XML Bean factory is a class which implements Bean factory. Similarly, for application context, there are multiple implementation classes are available. Oh, correct. Multiple implementation classes are available for what? Application context. In that, I told three class names which are important. One is called class path XML application context. Second one, file system XML application context. Third one, annotation config, application context. What are these three? These are the three implementation classes of application context interface. Okay, these are all called Spring containers. So how many types of Spring containers are available? Two types are available. One is Bean Factory container, second one is application. Bean Factory container is a old container. When the Spring framework was introduced with version 1.x, along with the Spring framework at that time, Bean Factory container was given. But later in Spring 2.5, version 2.5, after Spring 1.x, we have 2.x, 2.0. Then next we have 2.1, 2.2, then 2.5, something like that. Okay, right? So what happened next after that in Spring framework? I'll show you if you want all the versions. Okay. So then what happened in that case now? Spring has introduced a framework, a container called application context, which supports both XML configurations and annotations based configurations. Which means application context is an extension of what? Bean Factory, which supports what and what? XML based config. It can load the configuration from XML files and also it can read the configuration from annotations. But a Bean Factory container can only read the configurations from XML file, but it cannot able to load from annotations. So first, yesterday I have explained, and today I just want to write. Instead of writing like a statement, I want to draw like a diagram, because diagrams will immediately pay attention rather than statements. I'll try to make everything most of the times like a diagrams. Okay. What we want to do here, we want to do this. What we want to do is, see, Bean Factory. We know that. What is Bean Factory? Bean Factory is an interface. Bean Factory is an interface. Bean Factory is an interface. Bean Factory is one interface. I told, who is XML Bean Factory? Implementation class. For the implementation class name, XML Bean Factory. I am writing simply IMPL class. IMPL class means implementation class. Implementation class. I want to keep this one as one more box. Okay, right. We know that XML Bean Factory is a class which implements Bean Factory only, na? So implements means we are always going to use a dotted arrow or a dashed arrow. Now you tell me, XML Bean Factory is an implementation class of what? Bean Factory. In the last class I told this, right? Next, there is, okay, there is, okay, let's keep this aside because we know that. Next, coming to another interface. Coming to another interface. Who is other interface now? Application context. Tell me, application context is a class or an interface? Interface. Interface. What are the implementation classes of application context interface? One is class path XML application context. What's the one class name? Class path XML application context. This is one implementation class, IMPL class. Class path XML application context. This is application context interface. Tell me, class path XML application context is a class which implements which interface only? Application context interface. Am I right or not? Application context interface. Another class name is what? File system XML application context. What's the class name? File system XML application context. You have to know these things for interviews purpose. Do you know what is the implementation class? If somebody asks in interview, then just to answer that question. Now this is another implementation class of application context. Okay, I'll keep arrow directly from here only. Okay, na? Right. There is another class I'm writing. Who is that another class I'm writing is annotation config application context. Tell me what's the one more class name? What's the one more class name? Annotation config application context. This is also another implementation class. Another implementation class. So basically now you can understand that there are three important implementation classes are available. What is the first one? Class path XML application context. Next one, file system XML application context. Next one, annotation config application context. These are the three implementation classes of which interface? Application context. Okay, right? These are all the classes which are representing the Spring containers. So basically, if you want to say the types of containers, how many types of containers are available? Two types of containers are available. Who are the two types of containers? One is called a bean factory container and second one is the application context container. There are basically two types of Spring containers available. So these are the implementation classes. Now first, let us copy this diagram into our document. Right. First, I want to keep this into our document, guys. First, what I want to do, I want to keep this into our document. Okay, this is somewhat better. You guys can able to see the class names in the document, right? Right. These are the implementation classes. Now, how can we start the Spring container in a Spring application? Okay, we have to start the Spring container. Of course, when you are working with the web application development or when you are working with the Spring Boot, we no need to start the Spring container. It is automatically started. There is some starter class, it will take care of it. But when you are working with a very basic application, you have to start the Spring container explicitly. Suppose you are creating basic application or a simple console Spring application. When you are creating a simple Spring application, it is not a web application. If it is not a web application, it is a simple Spring application. You are creating a basic application, you are creating, for example, then you have to start the Spring container. If you are working with the Spring MVC application, or if you are working with the Spring Boot, then you no need to start the Spring container. Okay, Spring container will be started automatically. There is a starter class available that will take care of it. But when you are working with the basic Spring up, for example, I want to explain for the next week of classes with some basic Spring examples, some examples with XML, some examples with annotations. Then tell me in all my examples to test and execute our examples, I need to start what? Spring container. Right? It's not started automatically. I have to start. Are you getting my point now? Right. So once after getting all this knowledge, next we are going to enter Spring Boot. Once we enter into Spring Boot, you are not going to start the container. Who will automatically start the container? Spring Boot. Are you able to get my point now? Right. Good. So try to understand. So what's the meaning of starting the container? You have to start creating an object of one of these classes. You have to start one of the, you have to start the objects for one of these classes. Okay, right. Suppose if I want to start the Spring Bean Factory container, I have to create an object of which class? XML Bean Factory. And at the time of creating an object, okay, while creating object of XML Bean Factory, I should provide the name of the Spring configuration file as parameter. The configuration file name should be provided to the container. If I just provide the configuration file name, that XML Bean Factory, that Spring container class will take care of what? The container class will take care of loading the information from the XML file, identifying the beans, who are independent beans, who is a dependent bean, who is independent bean, injecting the objects. Everything will be taken care by container. That container class will take care of it. Just what I need to do? I have to start the container. How do you start the container in Spring? By creating an object of container class. Who are the container classes here? The class implements Bean Factory, or the class implements application context. Those classes are called what type of classes? Container classes. Those classes are called what type of classes? Container classes. So what should I do now? I need to start the container. How to start the container in a Spring application? By creating an object of container class. Who is called container class here? The class which implements Bean Factory interface, and also the class which implements application context interface. These are called what type of classes? Container classes. Container classes. Okay, right. I'm writing a Spring container can be started. A Spring container can be started by creating an object of a Spring container class. An object of a container class. Okay, who is container class here? The container class is nothing but it is what is this? It is an implementation class of either Bean Factory interface or application context interface. Are you able to follow me now? Either Bean Factory or application context interface. So whenever we start the container class, means whenever we create an object of container class, that container class will load the configuration details from the XML file, and it will identify the beans. Nothing but what? It will identify who is the dependent bean, who is the independent bean, who is the dependent object, who is the independent object, and it will automatically inject what? Dependency object to the dependent object. So who will take care of creating the objects and managing the objects, everything? Spring container. Just what I need to do? Start the container. How to start the container? By creating an object of a container class. That's what you need to understand. Okay, right. So I want to tell you something like this now. For example, Bean Factory is equal to new XML Bean Factory of config.xml. You observe this statement. Who is XML Bean Factory? Who is XML Bean Factory? Implementation class. Do you know this point? We can store implementation class object in the interface reference variable. Do you know this point? We can store implementation class object in the interface reference variable. Who is the implementation class? XML Bean Factory. XML Bean Factory is an implementation class, but Bean Factory is what? Interface. So this is a variable of type interface. In a variable of type interface, it's a reference variable. Ref variable I am writing. Okay, na? Ref variable means what variable? Reference variable. It's a reference variable. Reference variable of what? Interface type. In a reference variable of interface type, what we can assign? What we can store? Assign means store. What we can store? Object. Whose object? Implementation class object. New means creating object only, na? Who is XML bean factory? Implementation class. You know, at core Java level, everything from core only will learn. But suppose I'm writing list of employee, list is equal to new array list. We are writing na of employee, generic type employee. Got my panna? So tell me, who is array list here? Who is array list here, guys? Who is array list? Array list is the implementation class object. Array list is the implementation class object, and we are storing in a variable of type list interface, which means what you understood now? Implementation class object, we can store IMPL class object at right side. This we can assign to interface reference variable. So what I can write now? Interface reference variable is equal to implementation class object. That's we can write. Which means what? We are assigning the implementation class object and we are storing it in a interface reference variable. The same thing happened here also. Are you able to get my point now? Okay. Let's go ahead. Okay, right. Now this is called bean factory container, or another statement I have tried, or I can write what? Application context. Context is equal to, okay, reference variable name can be any name, right? So application context is equal to, what can I write? New class path XML application context of config.xml. This is the way how you need to start the Spring container in the application. Okay, right? So when you are learning the Spring core module, the basic module of the Spring, you are going to explicitly start the Spring container by creating the container class object. Okay, but later on, we are not going to start the container. Once we enter into Spring Boot, we never write this kind of statement. Why? Because who will take care of creating the object, container class object of Spring? Spring Boot will take care. That's why we are not going to write this statement. This statement you are only going to see in the first 1 week of classes. The first 1 week of classes when we are discussing about the Spring core module to learn the basics of the Spring framework. Okay, right? Good. So class path XML application context, file system XML application context, and annotation config application context are the 3 implementation classes. And the 3 classes are given to load the Spring configuration from 3 different sources. Okay, first 2 can load the information from where? XML. But the last one to read the configuration from annotations. Okay, that's called, it is annotation config application context. It is called what type of context? Annotation config application context. Annotation config application context. So this is going to load the Spring configuration details from the annotations. We are going to write a configuration class. It is going to load information from the configuration class. That configuration class contains annotations that we are going to see later, because currently we have not entered into annotations. Okay, all right, good. So this is how we are going to start the container. As I said already, better to write like a note. Under the note, the first point is what is bean factory container is a basic Spring container which only supports XML configurations or XML based configurations. Okay, which only supports what type of configurations? XML based configuration. Means you have to write XML files. I told in the last class, is there any rule that you must write only one XML file for the entire Spring project? No. Suppose I have so many beans are there, writing all the beans in one XML file is going to be very difficult to maintain. So I can divide my XML file into multiple XML files. Config 1.xml, config 2.xml, config 3.xml, like that I can add multiple files. Right, okay? If only less number of beans are there, one XML file is enough, because your XML is not going to become big and complicated. Suppose we are writing initially some applications next. So in our one XML file is enough. Of course, first two examples we are going to look at with the XML files. Then later I'm going to start with what? Annotations. Because you have to learn more on what? Annotations. XML is only just for knowledge. Oh, there is an XML. The Spring XML looks like this. There is a bean tag. Inside the bean tag, this is the child tag. For example, constructor ARG is a tag. Otherwise, property is a tag, child tag. Bean tag has attributes called ID and class. Just to know about that, we are writing on two applications at least. Just to get an idea that, okay, I also know that a Spring configuration file looks like this, to get some confidence. Right? Once after that, we are going to start everything with the annotations only. You have to learn everything with only one annotations, not with the XML. And Spring Boot doesn't support XML. It only supports annotations. Good. Good. So now, second point I want to tell you. Application context container is an extension of Bean Factory. Extension of Bean Factory container, which supports both what and what configurations? XML based configurations and also annotations based configurations. Third point I'm writing, application context is a child interface of what? Is a child interface of Bean Factory. So far, this is what we have discussed. But I'm not going to talk about applications and all these kind of things. Okay, just a minute. We are going to, before starting with applications, first of all, you should know the Maven tool. That's why first I'll start with the Maven tool. And after giving some knowledge of Maven, దీన్ని సెక్యూరిటీ అంటారు, దీన్ని బేసిక్ సెక్యూరిటీ అంటారు, దీన్ని గుర్తుపెట్టుకోండి. Later I'll tell this. Okay, this is called basic security. Okay, it will ask username and password until you give the correct username and password, but it will not allow you to enter into the website. This is called basic security. మర్చిపోయేది ఏంటో చూద్దాం తర్వాత. Status 403. Request is blocked due to recurrent login failures. Please try again in 22 seconds. This is called JSON response. ఇంతకుముందు యూజర్ నేమ్ పాస్వర్డ్ లేదు, కొత్త పెట్టిన. We'll do one thing. at this page, we can able to find all the Spring versions in one place. That's what I'm trying to do. Spring.io. Okay, I'll show you. Don't worry. I'll create a user and password in the JFrog repository. Then only I can able to log in. Don't worry. I'll create a JFrog repository login and I'll show you. Means at one place, we can find out all the Spring versions. From Spring 1.0 version to Spring current version, everything we can able to find in one page. And if you want to download separately, no need to download. But if you want to download the Spring framework separately into your system also, any version of the Spring framework you can download from that particular page. So that's what I'm trying. That's called JFrog. It's a repository with all the Spring versions. Okay. First of all, let us identify the Spring official website, spring.io. Okay. Spring.io is a website. Spring.io is official website. And you can find out some information like why Spring. If you click this, you can get that. Okay. Why Spring? Spring makes Java simple. Spring makes Java modern. Spring makes Java productive. Spring makes Java reactive. Spring makes Java simple. Again, the same thing will repeat. Okay, right. You can find out whenever you have some time. Today, you go to this website called spring.io and try to read this message called why Spring. Why Spring? Are you able to get man now? Right. Okay. Yeah. Spring is everywhere. Spring is flexible. Spring is productive. Spring is fast. Spring is secure. Spring is supportive. What Spring can do? You can create microservices. You can reactive means not react. Reactive means asynchronous applications. Okay, cloud applications, web applications. What Spring can do? You can create all these kind of things. Okay, serverless applications, event-driven applications, batch applications. Okay, all these things what we can able to do with the Spring framework. With the Spring, what we can do? We can create microservices. This is what our topic, Spring Boot with microservices. So where quickly deliver production grade features with independently available microservices. Microservice means what? What is microservice? A small service is called microservice. A small service is called micro. Micro means small, right? Very good. Okay, right. So these are all what we are going to discuss in our applications as well. When you are discussing Spring Boot with microservices, all these things I'm going to cover as part of our classes. Okay, right? Good. So whenever you have time, today, not whenever you have time, today only. So spring.io website you visit and try to know, just read these messages, right? Read this message. Spring is everywhere. Spring is flexible. Spring is productive. Spring is fast. Spring is secure. Spring is supportive. Okay, right. Okay, just okay. Read all these things also one by one. Just later you click on the link and try to find some information about that. Click on the link, try to know something about it. Okay, now? Right. Good. What's the official website now? Spring.io. Spring.io is official website. Now, when I go to projects, list, what actually we are going to see? Spring Boot. But directly we are not going to work with the Spring Boot. First, we are going to start with the Spring framework. In our class, all these are covered. At the very end, we will see if time permits, we'll try to say at least one application with the Spring AI, but I'm not sure. But because for this, again, AI models and all, that knowledge is required for you. That's why I'm not sure that I'm going to tell you that, but remaining all, definitely we are going to see. Spring Boot, anyhow, framework I'm going to Spring Cloud, data flow, data integration, batch, security, all these projects we are going to discuss as part of our classes. Okay, as part of our classes. Yes. This is Spring Framework. Current version of Spring Framework is what now? 6.2.2. 6.2.2. It is a Spring. Okay. So you have the Spring Framework provides a comprehensive programming and configuration model for modern Java-based enterprise applications or any kind of deployment platform. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Later you can see features. Okay, you can see features, nothing to read here. Why I have opened this is just to show you that what the current version of the Spring Framework 6.2.2. That's the current version of the Spring Framework. Okay, right. And if you want to know this version, we are going to see Spring Boot version. Spring Boot current version is what? 3.4.2. Okay, good, nice. Let's go ahead. Okay, by opening which website you can find some information like this? Spring.io. Very good. Now, from here, so you got some information so far with the Spring. Next, I'll come back to the Spring. I'll come back to the Spring and we will start developing the applications using Spring with Maven. So for that, which knowledge is at least some knowledge required about Maven? So that's why first I'm going to talk with what? Maven tool. I want to talk something about Maven tool. I will explain whatever the information is required to develop our applications with Maven. Okay, I'm covering much information about Maven, but still there is some other information available. You can learn it. Otherwise, in further classes, when you are working with the tools classes or JRTP sessions, you may find out there. Okay, right? But I'm going to talk about the Maven knowledge, whichever is required for understanding our Spring applications development. Okay, so let us start with that tool. Which tool we are going to start now? We are going to start with the Maven tool. We are going to start with the Maven tool. Online people, if you have any queries, please let me know. Type your message in the chat box. Okay, na? Type your message in the chat box. If you have any query, please let me know. Okay, now see. We want to start our discussion. Okay, we want to start our discussion today to know about a tool called Maven. So we want to know about a tool called Maven. Okay, let's have a discussion with Maven. First of all, to understand Maven, we need to identify first of all what is the build process of a Java application. What is the build process of a Java application? Sure. Because it is called one build tool. That's why first you should know about what is called build process. What is called build process of an application? Actually, build process means, okay, build process in short term, what we can say, okay, converting the code written by the developer, okay, converting the code written by the developer into an executable program. Okay, this is called build process of an application means converting the application or converting the code developed by the programmer into an executable program. This is called build process. This is called what process? Build process. I will tell you what are going to happen in what are the steps are going to be happen in the build process. Okay, right? So you have to understand first of all what is build process. What are the steps in the build process? What are the steps in the build process? Next, you'll understand about why a build tool called Maven is required. Maven is one build tool. There is another build tool also available that is called Gradle. So there are two build tools available. One is called Maven and second one is called Gradle. Are you able to follow me now? Right. Okay. Let's start working with the tool. Understand here. First, we need to understand build process. We want to understand about really what is called build process. Right. Now we need to understand about what is called build process. What is build process? Build process means what? I'm just keeping a question mark. What is build process? Build process means converting the code written by the programmer into an executable program or executable application. Converting the code written by the programmer into an executable program or executable application. This is called build process. Okay. Understand here how we can convert the program into executable program. Okay. Understand points here. See, suppose assume that I'm creating one application, one small program or application. For my application, whatever the classes are required, all the classes I have developed it. Means I have written the code completely. I have written the code. Code is ready. Next step is, after writing the code, I need to compile the code. Suppose you're writing one Java program, what next you do? You have to compile. Of course, when you are working with the IDEs like Eclipse and all, what happened? They will compile for you. They will compile. But if you are not using Eclipse, suppose I am not using Eclipse, then I need to compile. If I'm not using Eclipse, I'm using Notepad. Then Notepad will not compile the code. I have to compile my program by using a command called javac. Javac is a command we are going to use to compile the program. Java program, we have to compile. But one thing, if you are compiling a program like a Hello World or a Core Java program, it is okay. You no need to add any jar files in the class path. You no need to add any jar files in the class path. Again, there is a word called a jar file. Jar stands for Java archive. Java archive is called jar file. Okay. So it is one compressed file. Jar file is nothing but one compressed file. Like a zip file we have in Windows. Like that. A jar file is a compressed file which contains internally group of classes. Group of classes we are going to compress into one file, that is called jar files. Okay. First, in the real time I'm talking about, not just like writing a core program and writing a kind of inheritance program or polymorphism program or interface and abstract class program or hello world program, not like that. You take a Spring program or Hibernate program or any other framework program, you feel like that. Starts program something like any real-time program. See, to compile my program, first what I have to do, I have to download the jar files. These jar files are called dependencies of my project. I'm not talking dependency objects, okay? Don't compare with that. These are called the jar files required for compiling the program. I have to download first. I have to download jar files required for compiling my program. Okay, right? Understand the point clearly. First, what should I do now? I have to download the jar files which are required to compile my program. So first, what should I do? I have to download. Download the jar files. Download the jar files required to compile the application or compile the program. First, I have to download the jar files. Remember, jar stands for what once again? Java archive. Okay, what this jar file contains? This jar file contains a group of classes. Feel that these are all classes. So we are just going to make a group of classes into one file. That file is called what? Jar file. A jar is a collection of classes. A jar is a collection of classes. A collection of classes. This is called one jar file. A collection of classes which are developed or which are used to provide a particular feature. They are going to be compressed into one file. That file is called what? Jar file. So simply jar is a collection of classes internally. Okay, I'll tell you. Understand. Suppose, assume that. Suppose, try to understand. Suppose I am creating one Spring application without using any IDE, or by using IDE also no problem. But without using any build tool. Spring application, Spring Core application. To compile my Spring classes, to compile and execute my Spring programs, I'm sorry. So I need to download the jar files like this. Spring -beans.jar. What is the version? 6.2.2.jar, for example. Spring -context 622.jar. Spring -core 622.jar. 3 jars are over, plus 3 more. For first Spring program, if at all you want to execute properly, you have to download 6 jar files. How many? 6. 6 jar files you have to download first. Who provided these jar files? Spring Framework. What you have to do? Download. After downloading, next step is you need to add all these jar files to the class path. Set the jars into class path. Set the jars into what? Class path. Because whenever I'm compiling my program, suppose if some classes are not there in my program, then compiler is going to verify that classes are available in the jars available in the class path or not. Okay, suppose I'm compiling one program. In my program, I am using one class name, but that class is not developed by me. Then what compiler will give me? Error. When compiler gives me error, if that class is not available in the jars added to the class path. Okay, the name only telling that this is a path of what? Classes. Class path means path of classes. That's a class path. Are able to get my point now? Suppose I'm creating one project. In my project, I'm creating one class. This class is using another class. Using another class means what? It is depending on another class. But this another class, whatever it is depending, this another class is not created by me. This is given by Spring Framework. This another class is given by Spring Framework. Spring Framework has provided that another class, and this class I want to use in my class. When I'm compiling my class need another class, na? But this another class is not developed by me. Who given this? Spring Framework has provided. It is not there in my application because I am not developing it. Then tell me immediately what Java compiler will do. Java compiler is going to search for this another class in the class path. Will search for it in the class path. Class path is one variable. It is going to search for the class in this variable. Which variable? Class path variable. To this class path variable, what I am going to set? Jars. In one of the jars, this class is available. then what type of Java compiler will successfully compile my program. If this another class is not available in the jars of the class path, then will give either compile time error or class not found exception. Are you able to get my point now? So basically, what I am trying to explain to you now, whenever we are writing real-time application, not like simple core Java application, when you are working with some real-time tools, technologies, and frameworks, so you need to have all these things. So tell me, first, what should I do? What should I do first? Download or fetch any word. Fetch the jar files or download the jar files into the system. Okay, na? Understand what is build process. Second step, set the jar files to the set the jars into the class path. Okay, remember, whenever Java compiler is compiling your program code, your class, suppose if a class is not found, then first Java compiler is going to search for that class in class path. What that class path contains? Jars. It is going to search for that class in the jars. If still that class is not available in the jars, then it will throw exception or error, depends on it. Okay, very good. Either a compile time error or you'll get the runtime exception, whatever it is. Try to understand the concept now. Set the jars to class path. Once after doing this, then only you can successfully compile. Compile the program. In real time, if you're developing a real-time application by using tools, technologies, and frameworks, not just with only core Java, but with other tools and technologies and frameworks, these are the steps to follow. For the first step now, download the jars, okay, into the system. Set the jars into the class path. Then you compile. And in the real-time application, not only you are writing the source code, not only writing your program code, along that you are also developing some test cases. Okay, you are writing not only source code. You are not writing source code means what? Your project code. Plus you are also writing what? Test cases. These are called JUnit test cases. What is that? JUnit test cases. Unit testing that you have to do. You are also going to test cases. I'm talking with respect to the real time. Okay, you are not only writing source code, you are also writing the test cases. These are test cases tells that my source code is working properly as expected. Every method, every functionality of the source code is working as expected. Okay, so how can you prove that? Suppose I'm developing 2 classes and 4 methods in each class. How can I prove that my 4 methods of each class is working perfectly? By writing some test cases. I have tried them. Who should write the test cases? Developer, not the QA or test engineer. These are unit test cases. After unit testing, there are many other testings are available. Those testings will be taken care by test engineers. Okay, right. Test cases. So tell me, source code is compiled so far. Next step, what we need to do? We have to execute the test cases. To execute the test cases, again we need to set some jars in the class path. Are you able to follow me now? These are different. For example, source code is Spring. Then you tell me which jars you are fetching? Spring. Which jars you are setting in class path? Spring. But test cases are not Spring. Test cases are what? JUnit. It's a tool, another framework. Then what you need to do now? Download. download or fetch the jar files. Okay, for testing. For what now? Testing. Again, what to do now? Set the jars or add the jars to the class path. Then next, what you need to do? Sixth step. Compile and run the test cases. Compile and run the test cases. You just abstract, you just understand like that. Okay, later completely are going to get into your mind. The complete picture you will get like, okay, at least abstract you understand now. Compile and run the test cases. Okay, after test cases are successful, no errors are there, all the tests are passed. Now, at the seventh step, you need to package. What do you need to do? Package your application, total application, your complete application into a jar file or var file. Okay, now this jar or var file created for your project is the executable application. Now this jar or var file you are going to deploy on servers in the real time. This jar file or var file will deploy on servers. Could be JBoss server, WebLogic server, Tomcat server, or any other server in the real time. Are you able to follow me now? Okay, right. So tell me, creating this jar or var file, last step, this complete step after writing my code into creating an executable application, this total process is called what process? Build process. Is called what process? Build process. Tell me, before I start doing all these steps, what is there with me? Nothing is there with me. I have my code, that's it. Before all these steps started, what is there with me? My code is there. I have developed some code. Now that code is there. Source code is there with me. I have source code now. Then what I started next? I am downloading the jar files required into the system from internet. Next, I am going to set the jar files into the class path. Then I am going to compile my program source code. So the dot class files are created successfully. Next, download and fetch the jar files for testing. Next, set the jars into the class path. Then compile and execute the test cases. If test cases are passed, which means my code is working as expected, then package this code into a single file called jar file or var file. Okay. Once a jar or var file is created for my project, at the last, next this jar or var file will be deployed onto the servers. Now this total process is called which process? Build process. Okay. Tell me, finally my project is packaged into what file or what file? My project is packaged into jar or var file. Jar stands for Java archive. Archive. Var stands for web archive. Var stands for web archive. Jar stands for Java archive. Many things are going to learn in Spring Boot with microservices. You will get some real-time exposure here. Jar or var file. Java archive or web archive. Packaged into jar or var file. Okay. Once the project is packaged into a jar or var file, once it is packaged, now this file will be deployed onto what? Server. I'm using a word called deployed. Deployed means copied. Another word of copied is called what? Deployed. Deployed to whom? Server. Could be Tomcat server or WebLogic server or JBoss server, something like that. Deployed. Deployed means what? Copied into server. Into server. Once it is copied into server, now this is available for users. Available for users. Now users can interact with this project. Am I right or not? Can send a request. Users can send a request. But when the users are sending request at runtime, that is called. While users are sending the request, again, a small bug is identified. Suppose some bug identified in the application. A bug, a small error occurred. Are you able to follow me now? A small error occurred or bug is happened. There is a bug in the application. If there is a bug in the application, then I'm just going back to my source code and I'm going to do some changes in my code now. My question tell me, if I make any changes to my source code, do I need to compile again? Compile again or not? Yes. Try to understand now. Compile again or not? Yes. Very good. Try to understand the point here. To compile, because I did some changes in my code now, that this time, previously I downloaded one version of jar, maybe 6.1.1, but it is not suitable. Because of that, I'm getting some bug. I need 6.2.2. Then what should I do? Download again the jar file. Set the jar file to the class path again. Compile the program again. Okay. Download the new version of test files if required. Otherwise, the same thing we can use. Set the jars in the class path for testing. Compile and execute what? Test cases. Now, if the tests are all passed, then again package the application to new jar or var file. Again deploy the jar or var file into what? Server. Are you able to get my point? Right. Mana adrustam bale. Example. Okay. When users are sending requests, only failed. Some issue occurred. Again issue occurred. Tell me what to do again. I have added unnecessarily very high version of jar file 6.2.2. Actually 6.2.01 is required. What to do? Again we need to download, set the jars or add the jars to the class path. Then you compile the program code again. Next you need to set the jars in the class path for testing. Then compile and execute the test cases. After that you package the project into another new jar or var file. Then deploy the new one into server. Am I right or not? Very good. To automate this build process, whatever the steps I told you, na? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. To automate this build process, I told this is 7 steps are called what process? Build process. To automate this build process, to do this automatically, we need a tool. That is called build tool. This is called what tool? Build tool. What? Build tool. Did you guys understood what is build tool here? Build tool is required. For what? To automate this build. I do not want to do it manually. Previously what I did, manually I did. But now who will take care of this? Build tool. We need one tool to automate this process. To automate the build process. That tool is called build tool. Who is that build tool? Maven or Gradle. Online people try to understand now. Maven or Gradle. What are these are called? Build tools. Build tools. Are you able to follow me what the point I'm saying now? Very good. Maven or Gradle. Earlier, of course, both are from Apache only. Earlier, from Apache only, there was one old tool available. That's called Ant. What is that? ant, ant, we know ant. Okay, ant abbreviation, another neat tool, another neat tool, another neat tool, ant. And for Maven and Gradle, we don't have an abbreviation. M stands for, A stands for, V stands for nothing. It's a tool name given called what? Maven. I think it's some Greek word or something. Maven. Like polymorphism, Greek word, na? Like that. Maven and Gradle. All these tools, Ant, Maven, Gradle, these are all from Apache. Vendor is Apache. Okay, vendor is nothing but what? A company which is providing the software. That is called what? Okay, vendor. You are calling Apache Tomcat, na? Tomcat is a server from Apache. Apache Tomcat. You are calling like that. Okay, so more the tools are from Apache only. Okay, are you able to follow me now? Right. So these are the tools from, these are called what tools? Build tools. So why these build tools are provided? To automate the build process of an application. Then tell me, if I use the tools now, I no need to download any jars from internet. I no need to add the jars to the class path. I no need to compile my code. I no need to add the jars to the class path for testing. I no need to compile and execute the test cases. I no need to package my application to jar or var file. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I no need to do. Are you able to follow me? Who will do this work for me? Build tool will do. Who is that build tool? Maven. That's why you are going to use Maven for application development. That's why we are going to use Maven for application build process. Or Gradle, anyone we can use. Are you able to follow me now? Very good. Try to understand now. So for that, you should have some Maven knowledge then. How to use Maven is required. That's why we started with the topic. But you got finally what is called build tool now. Who will take care of all these steps 1 to 7? Build tool. Who is a build tool we are going to use first? Later Gradle, but initially we are going to start with what? Maven. Maven is our build tool. Of course, Maven can do more than this. It will definitely do build process. Plus, it also provides additional features. Also provides additional features. Am I right or not? Is everybody getting this point now? So Maven is like that. These are essential features, compulsory required in every build tool. Plus, Maven also provides additional features. Just like cars are having some additional features. Okay, basic car doesn't have much features, right? For example, basic car has windows, glasses for the doors, but you need to manually do up and down. You have to open, close manually. In some cars, what? You just press the button, automatically the glasses will down. Press the button, automatically glasses will up. Some cars are having airbags, some car doesn't have. For example, I'm talking additional features. But every car doesn't compulsory have some essential features. Steering is required. Steering, brake, accelerator, tires, wheels, seats. These are essential features. Plus additional features are also there in some cars. Maven also like that only. Means what Maven can provide? Essential features, build process features, plus additional features. First we'll learn how to work with Maven. Later we will see what are additional features that Maven can provide us. So you got to know what is build process. Now I want to write some statements which are related to the build process. So we are going to start discussion with Maven. Maven knowledge is very, very important, guys. And one more thing I want to tell you. Suppose today, if you want to ask me, sir, I don't want to learn Maven right now. I'm very eagerly waiting to execute the first Spring program. For example, I can tell you what I will do. First, I'll write Spring program code, XML file, dependent class, dependency class, or one independent class with some methods. I can write. Code is ready. Next to compile, na? To compile, what should I do? Download the jar files. I told just now 6 jar files are required. What I will do now? I will download the one by one jar file. Total how many jar files I can download into my computer now? 6 jar files I can download. I know the 6 jar files. I'll download. After that, what I will do? I will set all the jar files to the class path. I know how to set the class path. Set class path command is there. Set class path is equal to, I'll add one by one jar file. Are you able to follow me now? For sample, I'll show you. For example, I'm downloading Spring hyphen context hyphen 622 current version .jar. I'll open one of the website. Let us see what is Maven repository. You are going to learn that. Okay, then I will find out some small link called what? What is the small link called? Jar. How much size it is? 1.3 MB. Okay, click on this. I'm okay with this. Then see one downloading happening. One download happened here. Okay, it is at the finishing. Okay, at the finishing. Done now. Then tell me what jar I downloaded? Spring hyphen context hyphen 622.jar. One jar file downloaded. How many jar files I told you like this? 6. I can download. Then next what I will do? I will set all these jars into the class path. Then I will compile my Spring program. Then I will add one more jar files to the class path. I will run the test cases. After that, I will package my application into jar or var file if required. Otherwise, no. Real-time application is required. For first Spring program, jar var file not required. Just we are going to run the test case. Then I will execute my program. Are you able to follow me now? Is everybody got the clarity now? I can do manually or not? Yes, I can do. But when you are working with the Spring Boot doesn't allow development like this. To develop the Spring Boot application, compulsory you must use build tool. Otherwise, you can't develop Spring Boot application. Which build tool you have to use? Maven or Gradle. Anyone, Maven or Gradle, not only Maven or Gradle. Compulsory you have to use. Without that, you cannot develop Spring Boot application. So did everyone understood what is the point I'm saying now? Yes. For example, basics, these are all basics. If you know them, later we will play with this. You have some requirements. Okay, just observe. Somewhere to start popular choices like IntelliJ, Visual Studio, Eclipse or Spring Tools, and you need Java version 17 or 21 along with Maven also required. Okay, along with Maven also required. We are going to develop the project either with Maven or Gradle. I will show you just by expanding it. Just a minute. All right. If possible, you guys can see this one. Okay. Tell me to develop the Spring Boot project. What compulsory required? There are 2 checkboxes visible to you. Definitely either Maven required or this is not Spring Boot. Okay, Spring Boot. Definitely what is required either Maven or Gradle required. Otherwise, we cannot develop Spring Boot application. Okay, na? Which language you can use to develop the Spring Boot application? Java, Kotlin, Groovy. Okay, so this is our language. Are you able to follow me now? Very good. Good. Then you just choose a Spring Boot version. This is old screenshot. But what the current version you have? 3.2.2. Something is there? 3.2.4. Some version. Spring Boot version. But leave about that. But compulsory develop the Spring Boot application. Definitely we need to use a build tool called what, either Maven or Gradle. Without that, can we develop a Spring Boot project? No. Spring application you can develop, but you cannot develop For Spring application also, you need to try a lot because proper versions of jars and all you need to add. Okay. So I just want to give all this knowledge first. Instead of just telling it orally, if I show you physically, okay, the diagram will keep in our mind, right? I told even many times. Okay, right? Always whenever you are listening or whenever you are doing something, our mind always thinks about what? Picture, diagram. Am I right or not? Are you able to get my point now, right? If I'm talking about MS Dhoni, immediately what will come into our mind? Picture of MS Dhoni. Am I right or not, right? Like that, everybody to whom we are talking about. Okay, right? Good. Not only MS Dhoni, pencil, for example. Pencil, what come into our mind? Pencil only, right? The picture. Mind always search for pictures. Pictures. Everything. Either it's pencil or Samantha or whatever it is. Okay? Right, good. Good. Folks in online, I want to write some statements here. So build process means converting the code written by the programmer into an executable application. Executable application means jar file or var file. So what are the steps involved in this? The steps involved in this process or build process are, tell me what are the steps involved. Number one, download or fetch the fetch the jars to compile the code. Okay, first I will write, okay, download or fetch the jars required or jars to compile the code from internet. ఏదో ఒక website from internet simply. Okay, right? Download or fetch the jars to compile the code from the internet. From internet. Next, second step is what? Add the jars to the class path. After that, what you can do? Compile the source code. Tell me, after compiling the source code, next again, download, because in real time we read test cases also, fetch the jars to test the code. Test the code means to compile the test cases. Are you able to follow me now? Tell me, next step is what? Add these jars to class path again. And now compile and execute the test cases. Seventh step is what now? Package. Package means grouping. Package the application into a jar or var file for execution. For execution, every project must be compressed into a jar file or the package into jar file or var file that is deployed on server. Okay, package application to jar or var file for execution. Now you tell me, this is totally called as different steps involved here, right? Next. Okay. After the application jar or var file is deployed into a server, if any issue or bug is identified, then do you know what to do now? If any issue or bug is identified, then what to do? Then developer or programmer, then the developer has to fix the issue or bug. Okay, and again has to execute or has to perform the above steps. Again, the same steps required. Very good. So to automate, see, Maven is a build tool, I'm telling now. Maven will write the code for your application or will not write the code? Code programmer only writes, okay na? Who will write the code? Programmer will write the code. But what Maven will do? Remaining task. Downloading, adding in the class path, compiling, okay, executing the test cases, then packing my application into one WAR file or jar file. That will be taken care by Maven. Who will write the code? Developer only. Okay. So to automate this build process steps, to automate these build process steps, we use build tools. We use a build tool. Did you guys understood now? We use what tool, guys? Build tool. So now who is going to be the build tool? Maven. Yes. Maven or Gradle. Maven and Gradle are the build tools used in Java applications and these are provided by Apache. So basically tell me what Maven can do. What Maven can do? Automating means what? It will download the jar files. It will add the jars to class path. It will compile the code. It will compile and execute the test cases. It will package my application into a jar file or WAR file. Who can do all these tasks? Maven. Not only Maven, Gradle also. Plus Maven can also do additionally more other things also. That we will see later. But first we need to understand about what is Maven. Okay, right? So both Maven and Gradle are called as what tools? Build tools. So now tell me, by automating these steps, now the developer's point of view, developer can only concentrate on writing the source code, because who will take care of remaining work? Build tool. I don't need to worry on that. Build tool will take care of all these things. So I can able to concentrate only on developing my source code. I can write, I can develop, or I can concentrate writing my test cases, code for test cases. But I no need to concentrate on these jar files, downloading, setting the class path, compiling, okay, executing the test cases, packing the application. These are all the things which are taken care by Maven. So Maven is going to help me or not? That's what important. That's why we are going to use a tool. Which tool we are going to use next? Maven. You got some idea called what is Maven today? What is build process today? What is Maven today? Correct? So next we will start. Tomorrow we'll discuss about what is application structure in Maven. Okay, Maven application structure. Okay, next we are going to see about Maven artifact ID, group ID, version. So we are going to have project coordinates, Maven repositories, pom.xml file, which is very, very important. Okay, pom.xml, dependencies. So we are going to discuss about all these Maven terminology in the tomorrow's class. Maximum of the concept I'll try to finish it by tomorrow, which is related to the Maven tool. At least if you complete by tomorrow, if any something pending, then we can move it into next day so that we can start working with the Spring applications. Okay, because first initially we want to complete the basic Spring Core applications, then annotations. After that, we are going to enter into Spring Boot. So these are all the things you guys need to know, and we will continue on tomorrow. Tomorrow we are going to discuss more about the Maven. We are trying to discuss as much as possible in the Maven concept in the tomorrow's class. Okay, na? Thanks. We'll meet on tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Folks in online, if you have any query, please let me know. Online people,
No.
did you guys understood?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
No
understood.
question from me.
Yes, sir.